Alright, when you open up Blender you can see this splash screen here. Here you can see the current version of Blender. I'm using Blender 2.8 Beta. At the moment, you can open up the recent opened files. And down here you have some internet links, release notes, basically show you the current development. And if you want to support Blender with a donation, you can go to the development fund. Then you can open up blend files or create new files aimed for different tasks. If you want to close the splash screen, simply left-click somewhere here in the empty space. And if you want to open up the splash screen, simply click on this Blender icon up here. So this is what Blender looks like. Certainly you don't see this scene when you start Blender, but I added this few objects here so that the scene looks a bit more interesting rather than just looking at a gray cube. So now let's take a look what the default user interface looks like. So, as mentioned in the previous video, we have these different editors in Blender. So here in the center we have the 3D viewport. This is where most of the action takes place. That means here we will edit our objects. Here we can see the whole scene and so on, so most of the time we will spend in this 3D viewport. Then the next important editor is the outliner up here. This basically shows you everything which is inside your scene, like the cube here, which is actually a 3D object. Also we have the share, the ground, and all these objects are listed here in the outliner, which is very useful for us to organize our scene. Then down here, this is called the properties editor. Here we can adjust everything which is related to our scene or the objects we have selected. So basically the most things you have to set up, you do in this properties editor here. So besides the 3D view, this is also the most important one. Then down here we have the timeline. That means if we are animating something, for example, I want to move the share closer to the table. Then I create a quick animation here. You will learn about animation later in this course. But now I can play this animation down here. So, for animation play break and also for basic editing of the animations, we need the timeline down here. Then we have two special places here which are not really editors. This is the top bar here. This basically shows us some additional options related to the tools we are enabling over here in the toolbar.
So, depending on what I've chosen here, you can see that the options up here are changing. So here's a little note from the future. The video was recorded with an older beta version of Blender. And this one here should be how the final stable version looked like. Although this is still a beta, and you can see besides that we have colored icons over here, and in general some colors and minor things have changed. You can see that this big top bar is not there anymore because it is now optional. In order to view this, you go to View and then Enable Tool Settings. So it's not even called top bar anymore. Click on Tool Settings and then you will have this stuff up here. But you don't even need to show the top bar because you can also find all these options either over here, as you can see, it's basically the same stuff as over here. Or if you open up this little menu on the side, go to Tool, and here you also find these options. So basically you have three places where you can find the options for the active tool. So back to Zag from the past, and we have the status bar down here, which on the one hand shows you some information of your scene. For example, how many objects are in the scene, what Blender version we are using, or how many memory is used at the moment. And over here, it shows you some context-dependent shortcuts. So for example, if I move my mouse into the 3D viewport you can see down there, you have some options for selection and rotate the view, and with right-click I can open up this context menu, for example. But if I move my mouse over to the timeline, then this shows you some different shortcuts. Same works for all the other editors, but this also shows you options. For example, if I enable the Move tool using a shortcut now down there, you can see all the additional shortcuts I can use in combination with this Move tool. So if you are new to Blender, this can definitely help you to learn things faster, or if you forgot about a certain thing, then definitely have a look down here into the status bar. If you don't need the top and the status bar, you also can hide them. Then you go to Window, and then you can disable the top or the status bar. So this is an option for more advanced users. Basically, if you want to have a bit more space for your 3D viewer, for example, yeah. And then up here, we can change between different workspaces, but more about the workspaces I will tell you in another video.